Hey, friends, welcome to a new episode of the Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today, I was honored to welcome David Schull to the show. David has been an integral part of this podcast and bringing some of his best and brightest clients, most innovative clients to the show. David is the president of Russo Partners, a life science communication firm that is engaged in starting conversations that matter so that their clients can change the world. Who David is to me, as you'll see and hear very quickly, is energy. David brings an energy to his work, to his life, to every relationship that he has the opportunity to engage in, and that energy is infectious. I just love this conversation and think that you're really going to enjoy it too. David Schull, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you. This is a long time coming, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Jeff, nobody could be prouder of you than I am for the work that you've done, because you've done such a tremendous job with this podcast, the work, the mountain expedition, and more. So you bring hope to where hope is most needed. And in our industry, it doesn't get any better than Jeff Harmon. So Jeff, I'm proud to be here with you.
Awesome. So let's not assume folks know what you're up to in the world. Let us know what is going on in the world of Russo Partners and David Schull.
So first off, for those of you who don't know us in the industry, and that would be life sciences, our firm is a boutique of high-powered communications counselors. We all come from science, medicine, healthcare, journalism on my part, and together with about 30 people, we work with emerging healthcare companies, biopharma, medtech, diagnostics, device, healthcare services, and we help them to shape, build, and communicate their corporate stories to support their fundraising initiatives, business development, regulatory affairs, and on down the line. Most of our work is corporate comms with an emphasis on investors and strategic partners. We do direct investor relations as well. And we've been doing this since 1988, Jeff. That's 88. So if you go back to that, Tony Russo, my partner and the chairman of the firm, has been doing this longer than anyone else. We love this work. This is our passion, Jeff, just as what you do is your passion. And so busy time for us as we kick off 2025, and we have great expectations for a very productive year in this industry.
I mean, people talk about loving their work. And I don't just step over words, David. You just said we love.
Jeff, follow your passion. What do we teach our kids is that if you find your passion and you follow it, then it's not work. It's not work.
But what is the love? What is in what you get to do every day that spawns this authentic expression of love?
So Jeff, I think for us, and you can relate, it starts with what the ultimate goal is here. Is we work with individuals who are working to develop new drugs, new medical devices, new ways for diagnosing cancer and other diseases. The fact that we're involved so closely in healthcare and innovation and change where it's needed, that's what motivates me. That's what's rewarding. I come from a family of doctors. My dad is a retired orthopedic surgeon. My grandfather carried a black bag and saw patients from their home to his home office in Far Rockaway, New York, mind you. So this is an opportunity to work in an industry where the changes that we see and the outcomes that we can contribute to can really make a difference in the lives of people. So we're bettering mankind. That's what motivates all of us. Think about it. I could do communications work in sports alone, even though we do sports health. I could do it in travel and tourism, as many of my former teammates down here in Miami, where I work from home most of the time, have gone that route. But healthcare, Jeff, makes a big difference to you, to me, to our children, and our friends and family members beyond this circle. So that's what motivates me.
And you've been doing this for a long time.
I've gone more than 30 years. So it's interesting. I've worked with my current partners of Tony Russo and Brad Prunty this is the year number 20. and 20 years of working directly with executives who build, fund, roll out, sell, help to do more in this industry. These companies are all thriving. Some don't make it, but you know what? The spirit of these executives moves from company to company, and we often work with executives who are on their third or fourth business, but the mission's not changed. So I've been doing this specifically with Tony and Brad as part of the Russo team, and I'm a partner here for 20 years. But before that, I have a decade plus experience working with other healthcare companies and technology companies, including with a firm that I helped to build here in South Florida.
Mm. So I want you to talk to that young man, 30 years ago, 1994, and actually,
Well,
I
95,
want him to talk to us for a moment. And I want him to look at the man that you have become. And I want you to tell me, what is he saying and who you have become. And maybe he's shocked or surprised. I don't know. Maybe it's like, oh, yeah, that's what I expected. But what is he saying about David Schull 30 years later that has him in awe?
Well, I'll tell you what, Jeff, I always say, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad slogans and typical descriptive terms, but it's not about words, it's about actions. And so if you think of what we've done, I look now, if I go back and I look at that young man I was, and I still feel young, by the way, Jeff, you and I look great for our age. You know, I'll be 60 this year. What I see is that that young man had the ambition, the drive to be able to pick up books and read them, to learn, to understand complex topics. You and I know that in our industry where we work with scientists who become executives, that you have to understand the inner workings of these companies, which begins with a root in science and medicine. And so it's not for everybody. But I look at that young man who said, you know what, I can do this. I have the skill set because I'm curious, I'm hungry, I want to win, which I think is important in business in general. And I want to win by playing fairly, but I'm going to fight hard. So when I look back on that young man, if I could speak to, if I look both ways, if I'm looking back on that young man, Jeff, I would say, be proud and stay the course. Follow your passion. Never lose the desire to get up in the morning and to consume information and to be curious, to be hungry, because that's what will get you ahead in this world. Information is so powerful and important, which means the same reading schedule I had 30 years ago, Jeff, is the one I keep today. You and I know we exchange emails and texts at 5 a.m. Why? Because I'm up reading on my iPad in the gym upstairs in my condo tower, so I know what's happening in our industry at any given moment, and news breaks in the morning. So looking back at the young man, I'm going to say, you did it the right way. You didn't compromise. You didn't take shortcuts. You invested yourself, went over and above in order to be the best counselor you could be to clients. And most importantly, Jeff, you did a hell of a job building relationships. Because at the end of the day, the relationships are what really matter to us. Great work plus relationships equals success. And to me today, I'm so proud to have a big network of people who know that I've gone to bat with them. I've gone into battle like the wingman with them side by side, and we've done it all for the right reasons, Jeff. So that's what I've seen.
Mm. But I do want to flip it. Hey,
Yes.
looking at you, who would you say you have become?
I've become a lot like my business partners, which is interesting because one thing that Tony Russo and I might have different personal interests, but we have the same business spirit and competitive nature. That's why Tony and I work so well together. I have nothing but great respect for Tony. But what Tony taught me is also that it's not just this work that we do, but it's the life that you live to its fullest. That if you do that and stop worrying about things and don't sweat the small stuff, you're going to be more fulfilled as an individual. And that's what I've actually learned from Tony, which is don't just focus on the work, make it fun at every aspect, whether it's dinner, theater, go follow all these activities and have a well-rounded life. And That's what Tony's taught me. I said, when Tony celebrated his 60th birthday, I was there. When Tony celebrated his 70th, I was there. But I go back about a decade, and I said, I've really learned a lot from Tony about how to actually enjoy more of what we do and outside of this day-to-day operation, and to tie it all together. And that's one of the most valuable things I've learned over time. So to me, I say we work, Jeff, you and I, we're in the One World Alliance. We don't have separate worlds of here's the life sciences cluster, then here are my family. It's all one and the same. We all do things together and it works out well.
Hmm. I want to go back to what you were describing about Russo Partners. And one thing that I am continually astonished by with your team is every single person has letters after their name or descriptions that say PhD or MD
MD,
or
MBA,
in their,
JD.
or in their LinkedIn profile where they had time on the bench with companies. And I don't work with, you guys are the only life science communications firm that I work with in this way. And so I don't know what the roster of other companies looks like, and I don't really care at this moment. I'm curious, the philosophy that you and Tony and your other partner have committed to of having that caliber of folks on your team. Talk more about that decision and that philosophy of how to build your team.
That was a decision made even before I joined Tony. So if you go back to the early days of the agency, its roots were in Noonan Russo. 1988, Tony Russo and Susan Noonan had worked together at another agency focused on healthcare and general public and investor relations work. They left to form Noonan Russo in 1988 with a sharp focus on healthcare. And some of their first clients, they were not in biotech, they were healthcare services, hospital systems, and well known. So what they did was, as they began to dive deep into the world of biotechnology, they knew that the best path forward was one paved by bringing together people who were subject matter experts. So it's a different mindset altogether. And we carry that forward today, and we've never changed over the years. To us, the subject matter knowledge and passion are so much more important in hiring people than the base public and investor relations skills, because we know that through our style of operation and how we work together, we can teach. But if we hire somebody who comes with a public relations degree and no industry experience, it's a challenging opportunity because of think about the complexity of the subject matter. So the model makes sense and it works. I tell you what, when we get on calls with clients, and we do many of them this way. Funny, Jeff, before the pandemic, you and I probably talked via telephone. Now we see everybody, and it's a smiling Jeff Harmon here, just as you see a smiling David. But when we get on Zoom and Teams calls with prospective clients, and I introduce a Guillermo from Boston, who's an MD, PhD, and is still on the faculty at Harvard Medical School, but chose to work with us because he loves what we do. When I introduce an Ignacio or an Ola Priya, and they talk about their work as postdocs and where they earn their PhDs, you should see the sparkle in the eye of the individual on the other side. Now, others do the same. I mean, other agencies do it, but this is our core and it's unchanged. Yeah. So this is what, and I tell you what, when you take that and then our values, which are number one, passion, the passion that I'm communicating and showing, everyone on my team member has it. We have no sad sacks. We have no Eeyores here, Jeff. Everybody has the desire and drive to do everything we can to help these companies succeed. Client focused. We don't care when it happens, where it happens, or what's needed. We work with entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs don't work 9 to 5, Jeff. You know that. So we need to be there focused on taking care of the client, finding opportunities, bringing new ideas, not just reacting to do the work that anybody can do. Trust. We must establish the trust as a partner When I hear someone say vendor, I cringe. We're not a vendor. We're not somebody you hire to do a specific task. We're your consultants, your counselor, your partner, your peer. And forward thinking. I've done this, as I said, for over 30 years now. What's interesting is that the base of what we do hasn't changed, but the tools, the technology, and how we do it has changed. So we need to always look ahead and to identify what's next, first on how we do the work, and then on a subject matter side, this is the beauty of it, our individual team members, many of whom you know, have the ability to look ahead and have the discussions with the client company contacts as to what's evolving in immunotherapy, what's happening in neurodegenerative diseases, because again, this is their passion. They're on top, they read peer-reviewed publications. So it's just a great recipe for success. And I love this. I don't know what else I'd do. Yeah. I'm 60 this year in a few months. My partners are 70 and we all work, you know why? Because we have fun doing it. And our team members love it too.
Yeah. So, David, the name of the show is Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. What comes to mind when you hear me frame the name of the show?
Well, I think that it's interesting because the show is spot on. And Jeff, you know that we've had guests meet you, love you, want to work with you, want to climb mountains with you. That's a great thing, Jeff, by the way. And again, kudos to you for doing it. We talked about this when we were at the Lake None Impact Forum. I think that one of the most important conversations that they're not having is, we call it the reality check. You know that with the amount of dollars that flow into these companies, is that we always say it's better to fail fast and then to figure out an alternative game plan, or to have that alternative game plan in place from the get-go. Sometimes people don't know when to pivot or to throw in the towel on a particular project. And they don't do it because they're blinded by the handicap of being too close to the company. And so they're too invested emotionally to make rational decisions. And we see that now with a few companies where, if you look back on what they've decided to do and where they've spent money, the signs were clear that changes along the way would have produced a better outcome and position as to where they are today. So that's one of the conversations that we have to continue to push. We almost look at it as there are certain companies that you wonder, why are they still around? What have they accomplished? And you actually say some of these executives are collecting paychecks, but they haven't done anything. And it's just a tough discussion for some, because they want comfort, they want steadiness, they want consistency. But the conversations that people need to have that they're not always having, many do, many of the successful ones do, is you've got to make the decisions to make changes, to pivot, to fail quickly, and to move on when that's the case, as opposed to hang on with a glimmer of hope where you just burn through additional dollars, but yet produce nothing of significant outcome.
So take us into, with redacting all names, take us into a moment in your memory where you or one of your team members were facilitating the reality check moment. You were asking hard questions. Take us into that conversation.
I will. And I'll use as an example, with no specific client name or executive name, is we have a company that's developing a drug in neuroscience. And so it's for a very challenging indication. I won't say the indication because it will actually lead you to guess the company. But in neuroscience, where there haven't been that many innovations over the years, and you know that neuropsychiatry is a big area of emphasis, you've seen some developments there, degenerative diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, ALS. So just know that in neuroscience, which is challenging to begin with, I've been in the room with executives who have looked at clinical trial data and saw clearly that there were no signals of any significance that would warrant continued clinical development. But yet they would manipulate the information in order to provide some last stand glimmer of hope, to give them an opportunity to fund something, to get them to a point where they could then pivot as opposed to pivot at that time. So you often see people buy time that actually does nothing but waste money. And we see that regularly, unfortunately, We call it too in data world. I'm sure you see it, data dredging. People want to find that lone positive out of a negative. And usually that becomes the story too, because then ultimately the drug fails, the company might fail entirely. And yet look at the time and money that was spent to get to that decision when we knew earlier on that it wasn't going to work anyway. People will say, well, we had to try. But I think sometimes that's used too much as a crutch when, yes, we want to try for the benefit of patients. But if it's just not going to work, then change earlier. And so we see that happening.
And has that been moments when you've had a role as a partner in the room where you could be bold and challenge that decision or ask the hard question? What are the questions that you're asking when you have that seat at the table to do that?
Some of the questions we'll ask, do we have clarity as to what the next steps are? Do we have specific milestones that we know we can achieve, or at least we can communicate? Do we know what it will take to get what we have to the next phase in development? Is this data defensible? Can we support it? So these are the things that we'll bring up. Now, granted, we as communications counselors often chuckle a little bit and say, if it's only the communications that are driving the business decisions, then we're working with a company that needs a stronger leadership team. Because we're the communicators, Jeff. I can take what you have and help you to shape it for external distribution and consumption. But the actual operations need to be intact and based on a smart strategy and game plan that's put in place by leadership. So it should never be that we drive as communicators the strategic decisions, but oftentimes we find that's the case. And which leads you to believe that, once again, it's just hanging on for hope. And oftentimes these are the cases that an Adam Firestein and others will write about, and they'll look at how much time and money has been spent to get to a point where they could have potentially moved on earlier. So these are some of the conversation. Yeah,
And in 20, as you acknowledge, we're recording this January 2nd, 2025. As you look into the year, what is needed from a leader, a senior leader and leadership team, her or his, that's unique in this day and time?
well, first off, we need the leaders of this industry need to be able to make decisions and stand by them. And they need to seek counsel from their teammates and generals with whom they trust or in whom they trust, but they need to make decisions. And some of the hard decisions to make involve continuation or discontinuation of a drug development program, the acceptance of a specific financing option that's available. Because we often see that companies, executives just are too emotionally attached to programs that they don't make the right decisions. And then as things progress, a public company stock trickles down near to its all-time low. Company has no ability to finance its development program going forward with any favorable terms. And they're now sitting there facing the attacks from investors questioning, well, where's the strategy? So we need people who are well equipped to make decisions and to stand by them. And they need to make, if you're the leader, you make the decision, you'll seek the input of your counselors, your advisors, your generals, but you make the decision. And so we've often seen in this industry, scientists who are afraid to make decisions. They just don't have the business training. And that's one of the areas that I think our industry overall needs to focus on is how do you take a science entrepreneur, somebody with a scientific background or medical background, and transform that individual into a business leader? It's not a natural transition, is it, Jeff? Not at all. And so what's interesting is we work very closely with a good friend of mine, Galen Xanthopoulos. I believe I introduced you to Galen. And Galen's got the perfect course because it's called From Labs to Leadership.
I teach it.
Yeah, and see, there you go. So, and I think I connected you to Galen if that's the case. So that's how far back we go. Labs to Leadership is an important training program with curriculum that helps the scientist who worked in a lab, brought his idea toward the finish line, tech transfer out of academia, first investment in and now needs to run a company. And so I can tell you that some of the weakest decision makers are the pure scientists, because oftentimes they're afraid to make a decision unless they have the hardcore data to back it up. So,
And I imagine that you could have said that in 2000, 2005. But what my sense is of observing the market in this industry that makes it so important today as we enter 2025 is the speed of change.
speed
That
of change and
that
the lack of easy access to capital. So if you go back to the tail end of the pandemic, we saw companies that raised their final private rounds and then quickly pivoted with their crossover investor to take companies public without having any significant milestones to continue with to keep a stock price where it should be. In other words, they were very early with minimal data, but yet they went public. They celebrated. Most of those companies are underwater today. They're trading at or below cash. And that hasn't changed. What has changed is the selectivity of the investors. So you've got to be a shrewd, smart business leader and decision maker, because some of what worked in recent years doesn't work anymore as investors have become that much more selective in the companies they select and work with. That's what's changed. So lots of companies are out there with good science, but because there's still some questions, they're just not able to get these things funded the way they were in years past. And we're going to continue to see that as we progress.
And we talked about heading out to San Francisco for a huge week here in about a week and a half. What are you gonna be listening for as you step into that week out in the Bay Area?
Well, and I think listening is a good thing, because oftentimes we as communicators do too much talking, Jeff. And you and I are very chatty. At JP Morgan, we have a series of meetings lined up for clients with journalists, with analysts, with fund managers, with venture capitalists, with industry. I'll call them more of market analysts, not Wall Street analysts. So, what I'm listening to with my team is to hear what the honest sense of the state of 2025 will look for in life sciences. What are the signs of a big year? What are some of the red flags? And you can read much of this today, even as we awoke on the first market day of 2025. People are concerned about HHS and its leadership. People are concerned about the FDA and how will the FDA operate in the terms of the arena of drug approvals. So lots of unknowns as we change the administration in Washington. We believe will be favorable to the industry overall, especially from a business standpoint. But again, it's unknown. And so we'll be listening. We'll be helping to facilitate discussion. And we'll look at what the hot topics are going forward well into 2025 when we gather in San Francisco in a couple of weeks.
Mm, mm. And again, you're a reader. You in your gym on the iPad, what's the hot topic you already know without even stepping into the Bay Area? What's the one hot topic that you already know is going to be top of your mind for 2025?
Okay, so I can break it down in different ways, but one of the hot topics or hot areas will be, I'll call it area of focus or indication. We've seen a lot in the obesity space. As a matter of fact, if you go back a decade, there were 3 companies working to bring to market for the first time new treatments for obesity beyond the generic use of phentermine in combination with other generics. And I worked in that. I was involved with Arena Pharmaceuticals in the old days. All of a sudden, the obesity boom continued because one of the hot topics of 2024 was what? The GLP-1 inhibitors. Every day we found another article about the treatment, the advancement, the innovation, the head-to-head study. So what you're going to see in 25 are a number of other companies with drugs and mechanisms of action that work in conjunction with these GLP-1 inhibitors in order to provide not only weight loss, but sustainable weight loss and quality weight loss. So what I think we'll see, as we've heard from many, as we did a number of roundups and roundtables at the tail end of the past year. We started in November. We did some group interviews with journalists in order to talk about what to look for in 25. And we're talking about building on. So it's not more of the same, but it's what do we add to the mix in obesity drug development in 2025? Where do we go with immuno-oncology? And then, of course, the topic that everybody wants to continue to discuss, and we always say it with a smile, is what is the real world use of artificial intelligence in this industry? And what impact will it have? Or what aspects of it? I moderated a panel at BioFuture, and the discussion was, what are the real uses today? And what will they be in the near future if we bolt ahead 10 years? And we have some real cases of AI use. BioXcel Therapeutics uses AI for drug reinnovation. But AI is not a black box, Jeff. It's not a magical technology. It's just a tool that's used in order to help strengthen the work of a data team. But AI, again, we're already on day what? Day 2 of the year, but day 1 of work days. And I read so many articles this morning about AI and AI projections in 2025. So a lot more continuation of the same. But in the first quarter of the year, you're going to see this macro view of how does the new administration in Washington, D.C., and new leaders at HHS and FDA, what will that mean to our industry as a whole? Let's watch and see.
Yeah. Last question, David. You get the magic wand. I'm giving it to you, and you get to wave it over the offices of every CEO, life science CEO's office. And with that wand wave, you plant the seed of one conversation they're going to have over the coming week. What's the conversation you want every CEO to be having with their team, with their investor, whomever? You get to decide. What's that one conversation?
The one conversation needs to be, what's the greatest, most near-term impact that we can make in healthcare? And how do we get to that as quickly as possible with the resources that we have access to today? And notice I say near-term, because oftentimes we get lost in the grandiose vision of the biotech application of the future when it's challenging for investors and analysts to look that far ahead because they need near-term milestones. Think about it. If you and I worked in high technology, we'd see much shorter timelines and horizons for success and takeouts and more. But we're talking about the healthcare of America, the world. And so we need teams to focus on how do we get to the most important inflection points as quickly and cost effectively as possible in this new year. Because if we can't get there, we're going to have a tough time hanging on for the ride. And those hanger-oners usually fail at some point. That's where it comes back to. If you're hanging around and hanging on with a glimpse of hope and with trivial, minimal data, thinking that the world's going to change and you're going to get an influx of cash to prove right what was already proven wrong, you're fooling yourself. So be smart, keep the focus sharp and narrow, and you too shall succeed. But again, it's a tough battle out there, Jeff. But yet we know that at the end of the day, we're doing this for the right reason to help people. And that's what I love every morning. Like I said, I come from a medical family. You and I have had multiple discussions about the opportunities for the betterment of society. And it's just a beautiful part of our work. And that's why you and I work together well.
David, if folks want to know more about you and Russo Partners, where can we send them?
Our firm's website is at www.russopartnersllc.com. I know that's a mouthful, but that's where they can find us. Find me on LinkedIn. The other thing that you and I know, Jeff, I like to talk to everybody. I call it pay it forward or don't pay anything. So I often receive inquiries from CEOs asking if I'll speak with the son, the daughter, somebody. I mean, I spoke with somebody whose dad is one of the top military officers in the United States and was referred to me by a top biotech CEO, and she's looking for a new job. And we not only talked about the new job, but we talked about network opportunities. We talked about life and career. The more that we help each other, the better we're going to succeed together. And that's the way I say it. So what motivates me every morning the ultimate goals as to what our clients are looking to accomplish. But to be honest with you, Jeff, it's the people. I love the people with whom we work. I love talking to you, hanging out with you at conferences, seeing the journalists. We're just real people, Jeff. You know what? What you see is what you get. The energy level never changes. Maybe when we're tired, but we do this because this is our passion. And again, kudos to you for the great work.
Thank you so much for your heart and for your time, David. This has been just absolute joy.
Jeff, I look forward to it. And again, for people, Jeff Harmon, you share the gospel in your podcast and in the work that you do on a daily basis. As you said, you teach from labs to leadership, which is an important course. I suggest others should look into what Galen offers. This is not an advertisement for the Leadership Edge, but I was in a video for I believe the 35th anniversary of Galen's firm. And can I tell you what? I've sat at the table with some top executives in Galen, and it really does make a difference, because you can't just take the work from the lab and expect that you will succeed in the business of biotech. It's just not that easy. So Jeff, continue on. Let's have a great year together, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
You too, brother.